Welcome to the Introduction to Architecture and Environmental Design, Spring Semester 2013. Architecture is the skin of the earth. In these beautiful photographs by Jerry Ullsman, a Detroit photographer, we see the direct relationship between the human figure, our body, and the natural environment. As we follow throughout history, architecture, we will see that our bodies evolved from the earth itself. We are inseparable. I ask you to watch the evolution of the earth in 60 seconds when we're done with this presentation. You will see that for billions of years, nature was taking risks, making choices, learning from its failures, and moving on towards where we are today. In fact, humans only arrived in the scene within part of the last second. We have to remember now that we can fly to the moon and back, that we can dive to the depths of the ocean, that we should not look at where we are purely scientifically or objectively, but we should understand it in its integral nature as being locked into the form and substance of our very souls. In this most photographed picture of the earth from Apollo 13, we were first exposed to the actual finite parameters of Mother Earth. After watching Evolution of the Earth in 60 seconds, I invite you to watch Powers of 10, actually taken from this Sunday picnic in Grant Park in Chicago, up degrees of 10 all the way into the cosmos, through periods of activity and inactivity. You will then dive back in to the human skin of the gentleman on the picnic blanket and go into quantum physics, or the relationship and interrelationship of things very, very small and invisible to the naked eye. The skin of the earth wraps the earth. There are various layers. These layers are actually very fragile, and they are, in the big picture, very thin. They are in constant flux from the atmosphere to our topsoil, to our oceans, to our water cycles. I invite you to look at the Mannahatta Project, which will show Long Island as Peter Stuyvesant saw it as he came up the Hudson River, and look at our cultural landscape that we have created in 400 years. Cities are full of architecture and form our second skin. It's slower time and geological movements. Our communicative society mimics the first, but then it shifts. It makes a change here. It's always tearing down, constructing, collapsing, imagining, redefining its scale, and increasing in density, or diminishing and emptying out in a ghost town. We inhabit the earth. We inhabit the very creatures and the very lands. What we construct out of that is our own invention. The skin of the earth, the patterns of cities evolving throughout history. Built environment and our architecture in the built environment represents any constructed idea that we build as humans for our protection, our survival, as well as our social integration and hedonistic pleasure. Architecture is a physical phenomenon. It is an event. It is a hybridization of the natural and the built. It creates turbulence. It conducts ideas. It sends messages. It structures our lives. How it impacts the natural world is always a first consideration. One change affects other systems. Those of you interested in architecture today could not have come at a better time as we try to understand our relationship with other systems in the world. Most of us spend 80 to 90% of our lives indoors. Being informed and actually engaged with architecture is a useful activity and a lifelong activity that will change how you see where you live, where you work, where you recreate, and where you socialize. Yes, people, human beings, are part of this living system, and a change from one scale always affects other scales in the system. We are in this time of seeking new balances between what we create and what we destroy, what we value and what we choose to remove. Early on, and we will look at the history of cities and how cities grew, how we went from a mobilized society until a settled society to the 21st century where we are again mobile in new ways. Looking at this picture, what do you see is missing? You see a series of houses on blocks with backyards. You actually see a little carport. What is missing is the garage. This is a picture from the 1950s when the first suburbs out of dense urban downtowns were streetcar developments. As the streetcars post-World War II were ripped up, we began to see this urban sprawl stretched out where everyone gets their quarter acre. And in fact, this Cartesian grid stretched across the entire countryside, marking everything in plottable sizes of land that could be bought and sold. This is very different than early development, which all clustered first around water, and then fresh water, and then secondly, around places to grow food. Actually, very recently, since the late 1800s, we had to bring power for energy, the new forms of energy, to our cities. With suburban sprawl, that energy had to be spread out in a network, in a grid all over the city, all over the country, and all over the world. With the ripping up of the streetcars came the building of the roads. We built most of our roads between 1950 and 1970 in this country, and now we're just repairing them. Interestingly enough, there are still Roman roads built 2,000 years ago that are still being driven on, yet we find that we have to repair our highways every 15 to 20 years. And so look at the going and getting there, but not being there. This spread and sprawl changed development. You see below the bottom half is a traditional town where you have smaller block sizes. You see definitely where the downtown core is, where the mixed-use housing and the larger, denser buildings are. And then you see where the houses then step down. This is very different than everything on top of the east-west or left-right road. Sprawl is defined as single use. Here you'll see the big box district. Here is the mid-rise housing district where all you can do is go back to camp. This is the suburb where you have your own individual castle. And then this is the civic building. You can't get from here to there by walking. You can only get from here to there by driving. And with all this driving came the need for more and more cars. And these cars then, traveling from here to there, had places to stop. And the parking lots began to exceed the buildings themselves. We also see far out, far removed from any city, is this parceling or selling of small pieces of farmland into subdivisions. Once you get there, there's nothing there but your homes. Sometimes they were clustered in cul-de-sacs and in tighter areas. We also see this is called the T-bone, where you see a single road and a piece of parcel is set off on a long drive. We've seen the rise of McMansions, or the barnacled houses that have more than 4 to 6 to 8,000 square feet. And we also see this kind of sprawl spreading out. This is outside of Denver in the foothills. This is Boulder up here. And you can see that these are all houses and housing districts. Single use, here's a little bit of big box down here. Architecture is about development. Very low-rise development, very dense development, and the supports that are needed when development occurs. Interestingly enough, you can't get from this gas station to that gas station. You have to pull out and pull back in. You can't get from the historical McDonald's to the oil change. With this comes the big box districts, which then put some of the downtown areas or even secondary strip malls out of business. So everyone has to drive everywhere to get everything and to take it back. With this expansion of energy comes the expansion of non-renewable resources to fuel it. There also is the X-charge, or the waste. Architecture is now considering all of this, as it should. It's understanding that geography matters globally where you live. It understands what we use, consume, waste, and need to live on. And finally, we really are talking not only about our personal interrelationship with where we live and the buildings that surround us and the cities that we seek, but we're talking about actually sustainability of all humanity.